Agape and empathy are two of the most profound forces in human experience. Both reach beyond the superficial into the heart of our shared humanity. Empathy allows us to feel with another person, to enter into their emotional world without losing ourselves. Agape takes this one step further. It is the will to choose love for another, even when no feeling arises, even when pain or conflict obscures emotional resonance. In a world that increasingly speaks of compassion but often defaults to emotional avoidance or burnout, understanding the relationship between empathy and agape becomes a matter not just of healing, but of survival. Empathy is an intuitive resonance. It is the quiet ache in the chest when we see someone cry. It is the sharp breath we take when a stranger receives bad news. It is our mirror neurons firing when someone stubs their toe or trembles with joy. Empathy makes us say, "I see you, I feel what you feel." Without empathy, society fragments, connection collapses, morality becomes abstract. Laws may be obeyed, but hearts go untouched. There are different levels of empathy. Cognitive empathy, the ability to understand another's perspective intellectually. Emotional empathy, the experience of feeling what another feels. Compassionate empathy, not just feeling, but the desire to alleviate another's suffering. But even empathy has limits. It is vulnerable to fatigue, especially when we are overwhelmed by the suffering of others or when we identify too closely with their pain. At times, empathy can even collapse into codependency, enmeshment, or burnout if not balanced with boundaries and purpose. Agape is not a feeling, it is a decision. It is not born of hormones or desire, but of will. It is the deliberate act of loving when it is inconvenient, costly, or painful. Agape is the love of Christ on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It is the love that returns blessing for insult, service for neglect, and mercy for betrayal. Agape is a sustaining force even when empathy fails. A nurse exhausted from a 12-hour shift may no longer feel anything, yet she continues to care for the patient. A teacher disheartened by disrespect may still show up and give their best. A parent crushed by grief may still get out of bed to feed their child. These are acts of agape. Agape is not a replacement for empathy, but its transcendent fulfillment. Where empathy connects hearts, agape transforms them. Empathy may draw us near, but agape binds us together even when we cannot relate. Empathy opens the door. Agape walks through it, stays, and bears the cross. There are moments in life when empathy cannot reach. You cannot feel with someone who has harmed you repeatedly. You may not relate to the suffering of someone who chose their circumstances. You may lack emotional access to someone who manipulates, betrays, or stonewalls you. Empathy, in such cases, withers or disappears. This is where agape must rise. Agape is especially powerful in fractured relationships. It is what allows a person to pray for someone who abused them, not to excuse, not to reconcile prematurely, but to entrust the person to divine mercy. Agape is what allows people to serve without applause, to forgive without reciprocity, to remain faithful in friendship even when the other person falters. Empathy is reactive, arising in response to emotional cues. Agape is proactive, freely chosen regardless of cues. Empathy can be evoked. Agape must be willed. In a purely empathetic society, people burn out. Emotional contagion overwhelms the nervous system. Activists become jaded, caregivers become numb. Friends retreat from each other because they cannot hold more sorrow. Without agape as a framework, empathy becomes self-consuming. Agape provides the structure for empathy. It says, even if I do not feel, I will act with love. It allows us to be present without drowning, to care without collapsing. It says, you are valuable not because I understand you, but because you are made in the image of God. When empathy is held within agape, transformation occurs. The empathy draws us into the other's experience. The agape gives us the strength to remain. Empathy teaches us how to feel with. Agape teaches us how to serve despite. Together, they are a holy fire, cleansing, refining, healing. Empathy moves us to weep with those who weep. Agape sits beside them until the weeping stops. Empathy draws us toward the pain of others. Agape carries the burden with them. Empathy sees the wound. Agape binds it, even when our hands are shaking. Jesus wept at the death of Lazarus. He felt empathy for the widow whose son had died. He was moved with compassion for the hungry crowd. He felt with the people, but he did not stop there. He acted with agape. He raised the dead, fed the hungry, healed the blind. He endured the cross, not because he felt like it, but because he chose it. The Garden of Gethsemane shows the moment when even empathy could not carry the weight. In his agony, Jesus asked if the cup could pass, but then chose love. Agape is what made him stay. Empathy may falter under pressure. Agape does not. Saint Damien of Molokai chose to live among lepers, not because he related to their disease, but because agape love compelled him. Saint Teresa of Calcutta spoke of loving until it hurts because she knew that love beyond feeling was more powerful than pity. Empathy brings us close. Agape keeps us present. The saints knew this. They lived this. In parenting, empathy helps us understand a child's tantrum. Agape responds with patience when we're exhausted. In friendship, empathy lets us cry with a friend. Agape stays by their side when they push us away. In healthcare, empathy recognizes pain. Agape treats the patient with dignity, even when they're difficult. In teaching, empathy helps us notice a struggling student. Agape helps us keep encouraging them when there's no response. Agape does not mean accepting abuse. It is not enmeshment, martyrdom, or losing yourself. True agape includes boundaries. It says yes to love, but also no to harm. It offers grace, not permission for cycles of destruction. Agape can mean walking away while still wishing the other person well. Even Jesus walked away at times. He slipped through crowds that sought to kill him. He remained silent before Herod. He did not beg Judas to return. Agape is not clinging. It is freely given love anchored in truth. In a world filled with shouting, comparison, and constant opinion, empathy is endangered. We scroll past tragedy. We mock others' vulnerability. We become numb. But the antidote is not withdrawal. It is intentional agape. To sit with someone and listen, without fixing, correcting, or advising, is an act of agape-empowered empathy. To care for the elderly, the unborn, the mentally ill, the criminal, the stranger, requires more than emotion. It requires will. It requires love that does not seek reward. Empathy and agape are not the same, but they are siblings in the spiritual life. Empathy sees the image of God in another. Agape honors it with action. Empathy opens the door to connection. Agape holds the door open when the other person cannot walk through it. Where empathy ends, agape begins. Where empathy begins, agape gives it purpose. Together, they make us not just human, but holy.